Wyoming Territory, June 1883. The wind cut sharp through the cottonwoods as Rachel Hargrove stumbled down a dry creek bed, boots soaked, dress torn, heart pounding louder than the river that used to run through the gulch. She did not stop for breath until the sun was touching the red rim of the hills. Her hands were scratched, her knees bloodied, but she did not dare slow down. Not with Sheriff Alden Lockhart behind her. Not after what he had done. Not after what he planned to pin on her. Rachel had seen too much. That was her crime. She had worked as a clerk at the Sweetwater County Courthouse since she was 19. Now 24, she had learned to keep her head down. But when she walked in on Sheriff Lockhart and two deputies hauling a miner's body into the back of a wagon, his blood still wet on the floor, something inside her cracked. They said the miner had shot first. But Rachel had seen the bruises. She had seen the gold dust in Lockhart's saddlebag. She tried to report it. One letter to Cheyenne. Someone must have tipped him off. A day later, Lockhart accused her of theft, forged documents to make it stick, and locked her in the jailhouse. That night she picked the lock with a bent pin and vanished into the dark. Now, alone and hunted, she had no plan, only fear and the dry ache of betrayal. Her father had died 3 years back, her mother in childbirth. She had no kin. No friends brave enough to cross Lockhart. But fate has a strange way of folding paths together. As the stars blinked out over the hills, Rachel saw a flicker of orange ahead. A campfire. She crept low, fingers wrapped around a jagged stone. One man sat beside the flames, broad-shouldered under a threadbare coat, a rifle leaning on his knee. His face was half shadow, but the firelight caught the edge of a scar running along his jaw. She stepped wrong. A twig snapped. His head turned fast. He stood, rifle lifted. "Who's there?" Rachel raised her hands. "Please do not shoot." His eyes narrowed. "Come closer. Hands where I can see them." She stepped into the light, slow, shaking. He was younger than she expected, maybe 30. Dusty brown hair, eyes the color of storm clouds. He lowered the rifle but did not look relaxed. "What the hell are you doing out here alone?" he asked. "I escaped," she said. "From Sweetwater. Sheriff Lockhart is chasing me." His expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough to show he knew the name. "You a criminal?" "No," she said, voice sharp and clear. "I was framed." He studied her. "What did you see?" She hesitated. He nodded. "That bad, huh?" She sat down on the far side of the fire without being told. Her whole body ached. "You going to turn me in?" He tossed a stick into the flames. "If I was going to, I would have already." She looked at him. "Why not?" He shrugged, then met her eyes. "Name's Ransom Whitlow. I stopped listening to lawmen a long time ago." She blinked. "You're an outlaw?" He gave a dry laugh. "Not anymore. Used to ride with a crew down in Colorado. Robbed a few payrolls. Got tired of blood and noise. Now I break wild horses and keep to myself." Rachel let out a slow breath. "You believe me?" "I believe crooked lawmen are more common than honest ones," he said. "And you do not have a killer's eyes." Something in his voice made her shoulders ease for the first time in days. He stood and grabbed a blanket from his saddlebag. "You can rest here. I will keep watch." She hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" He looked down at her, quiet for a moment. "Because maybe I am tired of watching good people get steamrolled." Rachel pulled the blanket around her. She had not planned to trust anyone again. But something about the way he spoke, rough but steady, made her believe she might not have to run alone anymore. The fire cracked softly between them. Ransom sat back down, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the dark. They said nothing more, but in that silence, something shifted. In the morning, Rachel woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ransom saddling his horse. "I have a place up in the hills," he said. "Cabin's quiet. Hard to find. You come with me, you will be safe." She stared at him, unsure. I ain't asking for anything," he added. "Just offering cover." Rachel stood, brushing dirt from her dress. "You really mean that?" He nodded once. "I do." She met his eyes. "Then I will come." They rode out before the sun fully broke the horizon. The trail wound high into the hills, past stands of pine and granite outcrops. By midday, they reached a small valley where a cabin stood tucked into the pines, smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, it was simple wood walls, stone hearth, a bed in the corner, a table, a chair. Ransom moved with easy comfort, handing her a cup of coffee and setting bread on the table. Rachel sat, watching him. "Why did you stop robbing?" He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "My brother died during a job. Got shot in the back by a man we were stealing from. I buried him myself. Rode out that night and never looked back." Rachel looked down. "I am sorry." He tilted his head slightly. "You are the first person who ever said that." They ate in quiet. Afterward, Rachel helped him chop wood. She was not used to the work, but he showed her with patience, and by the time her arms were sore, she felt steadier. That night, she sat by the fire with a blanket around her shoulders. Ransom poured her a cup of tea and sat beside her. "You could have run anywhere," he said. "Why head north?" She looked into the fire. "I do not know. I just kept going." He nodded. "Sometimes that is enough." She turned toward him. "You think Lockhart will come looking? If he does, he will not find you here." She reached out, touched his hand. "Thank you." He looked at her, his voice low. "You do not owe me anything." "I know," she said. "But I am still grateful." His hand curled around hers for a second, warm and strong, and then he let go. The fire burned low. The wind outside howled through the trees. But for the first time in days, Rachel felt safe. And Ransom, a man who had spent years keeping the world out, found himself watching her and wondering what it would feel like to let someone in. By the fourth morning in the hills, the ache in Rachel's legs had dulled into something manageable. Ransom had gone down to the stream with a pail, and she was alone in the cabin, kneeling by the hearth, coaxing a fire back to life with cedar kindling. The quiet had a weight to it, but not the kind that pressed it offered space. She hadn't realized how much noise she'd carried inside until now. When the door opened, her hand went to the iron poker, but she relaxed when Ransom stepped in, boots damp, shirt clinging from the mist rising off the water. He set the pail down and peeled off his coat without a word. "I boiled some of the beans you had stored," Rachel said as she stood. "Used some wild onion I found near the edge of the rise." He glanced at the kettle on the hook and nodded. "You learn quick." "I had to," she answered, brushing her palms on her skirt. He sat on the stool by the table, running a hand over his hair. "You sleep any?" She poured the beans into a bowl and handed it to him. "Some," she said. "Dreams still come, though." He took the bowl, dug in with a wooden spoon. "They don't stop. Not for a while." She leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You still have them?" Ransom didn't answer right away. He finished a few bites, then set the spoon down. "There's a town in the San Juans. We hit a freight company there once. Thought it was going clean. But the driver's boy, he couldn't have been more than 12, he jumped from the wagon, ran into the brush. One of the men, Tate, chased him down. Said he couldn't risk the boy talking. His jaw tightened. I should have stopped him. I didn't. Rachel didn't move, didn't speak. She just listened. I walked away that night. Left everything. Horse, money, the others. I didn't want to wake up like that again." "You carry it," she said softly. He looked up. "Don't we all?" She crossed the room, sat opposite him. "You could have turned me away. You didn't. That counts." He looked at her, something gentler in his eyes. "Maybe I saw a way to make something right." A faint knock startled them both. Ransom rose in one swift motion, rifle in hand, stepping to the window. After a long pause, he turned back. It's an old man. Alone. Got a mule with him. Rachel stood, her pulse still quick. You know him? No. But he's limping. He eased the door open, rifle lowered but ready. The man stood hunched, wrapped in a wool blanket, one boot missing. His gray beard was tangled with pine needles. Name's Enoch, he rasped. Lost the trail coming down from Bridger's Ridge. Mule spooked at a cougar call last night through me. Ransom stepped aside, motioned him in. You hurt bad? Ankles twisted. Not broke. Can't travel till it sets right. Rachel fetched a cup of water and handed it to him. We've food if you're hungry. He nodded, lowering onto the bench with a groan. Mighty kind. Ransom set his rifle aside, watching the man with the careful eye of someone who'd seen too many lies told with steady hands. They fed Enoch and wrapped his ankle with a strip of linen from an old shirt. He didn't ask questions, didn't press about their arrangements. Just told stories about trapping along the Snake River and a woman he'd left behind in Helena. When he dozed off near the hearth, Rachel stepped out onto the porch. The sun had dipped low, casting the pines in long gold shadows. Ransom joined her, arms folded. You trust him? She asked. Enough to let him warm up, he said. But I'll be keeping watch tonight. She looked at him. You don't rest much, do you? He shrugged. Hard to sleep when you're used to riding with your back to a wall. She leaned against the post beside him. I never thought I'd be hiding in the mountains with a man who once robbed payrolls. And I never thought I'd be sharing stew with a courthouse clerk on the run. She smiled, faint and tired. You ever think about leaving the territory? Sometimes. Thought about Oregon once. Heard the coast got trees so tall they blot out the sun. You'd go alone? He glanced at her. Didn't think I'd go at all. She turned toward him, her voice quieter. If I make it through this, I don't want to run anymore. Then don't, he said. You're not alone now. They stood a while longer in the hush of pine and wind. Neither said what they were both beginning to feel. It was too soon, too fragile. But it was taking shape, slowly, like the first warmth after a hard frost. Inside, the fire cracked softly. Enoch stirred but didn't wake. Rachel looked up at the sky, stars just beginning to show. Maybe tomorrow, I'll tell you what I wrote in that letter to Cheyenne. Ransom didn't press her. He just nodded, his voice low. I'll be here. The snow came early that year, tumbling down from the high ridges in slow, stubborn flakes that stuck to the pine boughs and softened the trail. Rachel woke to it blanketing the roof, the sound of it hushed and steady against the world outside. Inside the cabin, the hearth glowed dim, its coals still warm from the night. Ransom had already gone out, his coat missing from the peg and tracks leading from the porch into the trees. She pulled on the boots he'd given her too big, worn at the heel, and stepped out into the white. She found him near the lean-to, brushing snow off the mule's back while Enoch sat wrapped in a quilt, puffing on a corncob pipe with one booted foot propped on a stump. Ransom looked up. Figured you'd sleep longer. Rachel rubbed her arms through her shawl. It's too quiet to sleep. Enoch chuckled. That's how you know winter's comin' in honest. When the world forgets how to make noise. She crossed to the fence, watching Ransom adjust the feed sack. I was thinking, she said. Once the snow sets in, Lockhart may assume I crossed to Utah or froze trying. Maybe, Ransom said, tying off the strap. But I don't count on men like him giving up easy. He's the kind who likes to finish what he starts. Rachel glanced at the sky, where the sun tried and failed to push through the clouds. If he finds this place, he won't, Ransom said, not looking up. Not unless one of us leads him. Enoch tapped ash into the snow. If you're worried I aim to sell your name, don't. I've seen what lawmen become when nobody checks their grip. Rachel nodded once. I believe you. Later, as Enoch dozed inside and the snow deepened, Ransom took her up the trail past the ridge, showing her where the traps were laid and how to read the tracks of fox and hare in fresh powder. He moved with practiced ease, pointing without speaking, letting her learn through her gaze. When they returned, Rachel hung her damp shawl near the hearth. You ever think about going back down? To a town, I mean. Ransom poured a measure of cornmeal into a pot, stirring slow. And do what? Anything. Blacksmith. Freight runner. You know horses better than most I've met. He didn't answer right away. Then, I did that once. Down in Gunnison. Tried acting like I belong. But folks have a way of sniffing out what you used to be. Even when you're not it anymore. Rachel sat on the bench, folding her hands. You're not that man now. He stirred, jaw tight. Doesn't matter. They don't forget. She watched the fire flicker, then said, I wonder if I'll ever stop feeling like I'm just borrowing time. You're not, he said. You're surviving. She looked up. And you? He met her gaze. I was waiting. For what? He didn't answer. Just set the pot to boil and stepped away, the silence between them full of things neither knew how to name. That evening, Enoch's breathing turned shallow. Rachel pressed a hand to his forehead and found it damp with sweat. Ransom fetched willow bark from his stores, boiled it down, and helped Rachel hold the old man upright as he drank. Could have died out there. Enoch muttered, voice hoarse. Was ready to. You're not done yet, Rachel said, tucking the quilt tighter around him. He studied her for a moment. You got that fire in your eyes. The kind that don't go out, even when the wind howls. Rest now, she said, brushing his grizzled hair back. After the cabin fell quiet, Rachel stepped outside to clear her head. The moon hung silver over the trees, lighting the white world in pale blue. Ransom joined her after a while, crunching softly through the snow. He'll pull through. She nodded. He's got grit. They stood side by side, breath clouding in the cold. I used to think I was meant to be alone, Rachel said. That it was the only way to stay safe. But now I'm starting to wonder if that was just fear talking. Ransom watched her for a long moment. You're not alone anymore. You know that, don't you? She turned to him. I know. He reached for her hand, his touch careful, like he was still learning how to be gentle. She didn't pull away. They stood like that, fingers laced, snow falling soft around them. No vows. No promises. Just a quiet truth blooming in the space between them. Earned, not given. Steady, not rushed. And for the first time in a long while, Rachel felt like she wasn't running from something. She was walking toward it. By mid-December, the valley had sunk into deep quiet. Snow pressed heavy on the roof, and the woodpile stood half its size. Rachel had learned to lace her boots with stiff fingers, to bank the fire before sleep, to keep her sleeves rolled down to spare her wrists from the cold. The days passed with the rhythm of survival, water hauled, traps checked, soup stirred slow over the hearth. But beneath it, something steadier had taken root. Ransom brought in a hare one morning, shaking snow from his shoulders as he shut the door behind him. You're favoring your left side again, Rachel said without looking up from the stitching in her lap. He set the rifle against the wall. Trap snapped wrong. Got me in the thigh, just a graze. She set the needle aside and crossed to him, pulling his coat open to check. You didn't tear it, did you? Just the skin. She studied the fabric. We'll patch it after supper. He gave a quiet nod and turned to dress the hare. Behind them, Enoch shifted under his quilt, still asleep, his breath thicker now, touched with a rattle that hadn't been there before. Rachel poured hot water into a basin and returned to her stitching. We'll need to ride out for supplies once the pass thaws. There's only so much dried meat left. We'll go together, Ransom said, slicing along the belly of the hare. You sure that's wise? His knife paused. I don't want you riding into a town alone. Not with your face remembered. She studied him. You think someone would recognize me this far west? Lockhart's reach is longer than you think. He straightened. But mine's longer if it needs to be. Rachel folded the cloth across her lap. You ever kill anyone outside a robbery? He didn't answer right away. Then, once, a man in Durango. He laid hands on a waitress. Thought nobody'd stop him. She turned toward the window, watching the snow fall in slow drifts. And afterward? I left the town before sunrise. Didn't wait to see if she was grateful. Rachel's voice stayed low. I would have been. He didn't reply. That evening, Rachel sat on the floor by Enoch's cot, wiping his forehead with a damp cloth. His eyes fluttered open, then settled on her with a faint recognition. You're the one who keeps the fire going, he rasped. I reckon that's true. He coughed, hand twitching under the quilt. You ever think about staying? Here, I mean. Not just hiding. Rachel glanced back at Ransom, who was carving a piece of pine into something small and careful. I think about it more than I used to. Enoch's eyes drifted shut again. When you stop running, you learn what your hands are good for. Later, after she'd helped Ransom hang the hare meat to dry and stirred the ashes in the hearth, he reached for the carving on the table, an unfinished horse, its legs still rough. You're making that for someone? Not yet, he said, setting it down. I just needed something steady to do with my hands. She sat across from him. You ever think about what comes after? If we make it through the winter, if Lockhart gives up, what then? He leaned back in the chair, arms folded. I'd find land. Flat enough for oats. Near water. Build something better than what I've had. And me? He met her gaze. You'd have a place if you wanted it. Rachel stood and crossed the room, each step slow, deliberate. She stopped beside him, resting her hand on the back of his chair. I want it. He looked up at her, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. You sure? I'm not afraid of ghosts anymore. Not if you're beside me. He stood, and for a long moment they didn't touch. Just stood together, close enough to feel each other's breath. Then he leaned down, and she met him halfway. The kiss was quiet. No rush, no heat, just the soft press of two people who had earned the moment with every mile behind them. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his chest. We'll need more seed come spring, she said. I'll ride to Green River when the thaw comes, he said. Bring back what we need. Behind them, the fire popped in the hearth. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside the cabin, it was warm. Enoch passed before the new year. Ransom and Rachel buried him on a rise above the cabin, where the snow thinned and the morning light touched early. They wrapped him in the wool quilt he'd favored and used the last of the cedar planks for the marker. Ransom carved the name by hand, slow and steady, while Rachel pressed her palm against the frozen earth, breath catching in her throat. They didn't speak much that day. The sky hung low, and the wind came down from the ridge in long, sighing gusts. Afterward, they sat shoulder to shoulder on the porch, watching the trail disappear beneath fresh snowfall. Ransom rubbed his hands together, gaze fixed on the horizon. He said once he'd seen the Missourian flood, and it still didn't scare him like dying alone would. Rachel tucked her knees to her chest. He didn't. No, Ransom said. He didn't. The days began stretching again, minute by minute. On clear afternoons, Rachel pored over the small ledger Enoch had left behind, scratched notes about trapping lines, planting times, and a rough sketch of the valley's water table. She ran her fingers along the pencil lines, lips moving silently as she read. Ransom started sawing new boards from a felled spruce, stacking them behind the lean-to for a tool shed. He'd wake early, before the frost lifted, and work until his shoulders ached. Rachel would bring him water, sometimes just stand nearby, watching the careful way he measured twice before cutting. One morning, she came down the slope holding a handful of dried thistle root. If we steep this long enough, it might help with your cough. Ransom wiped his brow. You planning to start doctoring? No, she said. But I figure I ought to learn something useful. He looked at her, mouth tugging at the corner. You already have. In February, a lone rider came up the southern trail. He was bundled in a buffalo coat, face half covered in scarf and goggles. Rachel spotted him from the window and called for Ransom, who stepped out with his rifle and waited by the porch. The man stopped 10 yards off, raising a gloved hand. "I'm looking for someone goes by Whitlow." "Ransom Whitlow." Ransom didn't move. "Who's asking?" "Name's Keats. I was with the old crew. Back in Colorado." Rachel stepped behind the door frame. Ransom lowered the rifle slightly. "I thought you were dead." Keats pulled down the scarf. His face was leaner, his beard streaked with frost. "Nearly was. Got caught in a flood west of Pagosa. Took me a year to walk straight again." Ransom didn't answer, so Keats continued. "I'm not here to pull you back in. Just came to tell you something." Rachel stepped out now, careful, a shawl wrapped around her. Keats glanced at her, then back to Ransom. "Lockhart's gone." Ransom's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, gone?" "Fell from a horse crossing the green. Ice took him under. They didn't find him for days. Words reached all the way to Cheyenne." Rachel's breath caught. "You're certain?" Keats nodded. "Certain as snow in January." Ransom looked at Rachel. "That change anything for you?" She didn't look away. "No. I wasn't hiding from him anymore." Keats set a small parcel on the ground. "Left something for you. Ledger from the old days. Thought you'd want to burn it before someone else found it." Ransom gave a short nod. "Appreciate it." Keats looked between them. "You're building something here. I can see that. Don't let it rot from the inside." He turned his horse and rode back down the trail without waiting for thanks. That night, they burned the ledger in the hearth. Rachel watched the pages curl and blacken until nothing remained but ash. She stood, took Ransom's hand, and led him to the table. "I want to stay here. Not just through spring. I mean stay." He looked at her, eyes steady. "With me?" "With you," she said. "If you'll have me." He reached into his coat and pulled out the carved horse he'd never quite finished. The legs were smooth now, the mane detailed. He set it in her palm. "I couldn't find words. But I've been building this for a while." She closed her fingers around it, tears welling. "It's perfect." They wed in the first warmth of March. Just the two of them, hands clasped beneath the budding branches, vows spoken in low voices that didn't need to echo. Ransom placed a silver ring on her finger one he bartered for years ago, and kept buried beneath his saddle blanket. Rachel pressed her lips to his, and when she did, the wind in the trees hushed. They cleared land together, marked out a garden bed, and built a second room onto the cabin. Rachel planted seeds she'd saved from Enoch's winter stores, while Ransom taught her how to string a fence line true. She learned how to read the sky for storms, and where the deer trailed down in early dusk. He learned which tea she made for his aching knees and how she hummed softly when she folded linens. In summer, they met a trader's family from a nearby canyon and bartered hides for flour and sugar. Rachel made pies so sweet Ransom insisted on rationing them, though he never kept to it. They slept with the windows open, listening to owls call and the creek run full. By autumn, the valley had taken their shape. The porch bore the marks of her boot heels, the shed hung with bridles he'd repaired by hand, and the hearth glowed with a fire they'd built together, stick by stick. Life did not grow easy, but it grew honest. And in the quiet that followed each day's labor, Ransom would hold Rachel close, his hand over the place her heart beat steady, and she would whisper that she'd never dreamed of peace like this, but now that she had it, she'd never let it go. They grew old in that valley. And they grew together.